Good evening. This is a joint meeting of the Mashpee Planning Board and Affordable Housing Committee. It's Wednesday, November 17th, 2021, in the Wacoit Meeting Room, Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Massachusetts, 02649. It is 7 o'clock. We're broadcast live on local channel 18, streamed live on the Town of Mashpee website, www.mashpee.gov/channel-18. I would ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda, review of the minutes from the meeting of November 3rd. They are in your package.
I had two minor findings on the minutes that probably need correcting. They're both on page 5. And third paragraph, it talks about blame, okay, it says only ones to blame are Mashpee Commons. I believe it should be Commons.
Oh, very good. Yep.
And then,
Better man than me.
and then the fourth line up from the bottom, they misspelled my name.
Well, that's important.
Yep, there it is.
You pay more attention than I do, I'll tell you that much. I missed both of those.
With those changes, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Dennis, you want to do it?
I make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
I will second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain from approving those minutes.
Okay. Public discussion. I don't, Evan, do we have a sheet?
Come on there.
Thank you. Arden Russell.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Arden Russell, Sturgis Lane. The microphone
Yeah, something feedback.
is clearly working tonight. You must be courteous and kind. You must keep your comments to 2 minutes or you'll be cut off. Your comments must be relevant to this meeting's agenda topic or the immediate prior meeting. I'm sure you recognize these public comment rules as you, Mr. Chairman, created them and have been fastidiously enforcing them since you became chair. In fact, public comment at planning board meetings has been a controversial topic of conversation and has been discussed at almost every planning board meeting that you have chaired. It even elicited an open meeting law violation complaint against you. It's for these reasons that it was so disturbing and so upsetting to witness the hypocrisy of your actions at the last planning board meeting. There was public comment that was not held to any of these rules. How quickly you dispersed with your own rules when it's a comment that you are in agreement with, aligns with your opinions, and served your personal purpose. It now appears your rules are only applied to some and not to others. Your partiality appears front and center, even in enforcement of your own rules. What this community wants and needs from this board is fairness and impartiality. We want a board that steers clear of personal attacks and focuses on the important business of Mashpee. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Barbie.
Lynn Barbie, Surf Drive. Good evening to the Planning Board and to the Affordable Housing Committee. First, I want to express my dismay at the slanderous comments that were made about me and others at the previous Planning Board meeting. I am the author of any letter I send to the press. To allege otherwise is an affront and slander. Now, I have a statement to read. It may take me a little bit, but we've got 7 minutes or so because that's what was allowed last time, so. The recent shocking personal attacks on the planning board and member Mary Wagon are very disturbing. Mary Wagon is a long-term leader on the planning board, bringing extraordinary expertise to its deliberations. We appreciate all her efforts to provide the citizens of Mashpee with correct, impartial advice and information on all issues that come before the board. At planning board meetings, her questions to applicants and to others who are presenting concerns are a key element of the public, like me, public's understanding of the complex issues as they are presented to the board. Mary's years of experience, institutional memory, and knowledge of legal and procedural processes have proved invaluable to the board, especially in recent years. In addition to her elected position, Mary is also an exemplary citizen, encouraging residents to attend meetings, voice their concerns, and volunteer for town committees. I know that personally. She responds to constituents' requests and provides accurate, unbiased information to those seeking to understand the hows and whys of the planning board's decisions. I commend Mary Wagon's integrity and dedication, and I support her valuable presence on the planning board. Those are my words, but many other people have expressed their support for this statement. Every day I learn of other people who also support it. If anyone is interested in talking to me about it, you can get to me on Envision Mashpee's website or Envision Mashpee's Facebook page. Finally, to the agenda. I am so happy that the Affordable Housing Committee is here, and it's meeting with the planning board. I have been going to their meetings, learning as much as I can about affordable housing. And I know now that there are 2 projects that are in the works for affordable workforce or low-income housing. I believe many residents are not aware of the progress that the town has made and is making to address our housing issues, including the 108 Commercial Street, the Red Brook Village, that's a nice name, which is the Falmouth Road, and the work that Habitat for Humanity does. I look forward to hearing your report tonight, and I thank you for coming and sharing that with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
It's a little early to open the public hearing. Committee reports, let's try that. Cape Cod Commission,
I don't have a report for the Cape Cod Commission.
Community Preservation.
Okay, I do. Okay, so as everybody know, Mashpee is a community preservation community, and these funds are raised from a 2% surcharge on property tax and a match from the state. And just today, the statewide Community Preservation Coalition announced a historic high distribution of funds of $79 million statewide. So that's good news for the state. So if I understand this email correctly from the Community Preservation Coalition, for Mashpee, for fiscal year 2021, the town raised $1.5 million for community preservation funds. And those funds can be used for affordable housing, historic preservation, open space, and recreation. Now, if I understand this right, the match from the state is $700,000. It's a 34% match. It's one of the highest matches we've seen in years. Just in time because the Community Preservation Committee received 8 applications for funding. And I'm just going to list these. I think we have time. Do I have time?
7:10.
Okay.
We can go back.
Wait, let's
we'll
go
go back.
back.
Yeah,
We'll go
definitely.
back, and I'll list them for the committee, the board.
Okay, so I am going to open the public meeting. It's 7:10. Applicant Southworth Mashpee Properties LLC, Willow Circle, lots addressed as 178 to 186 Quiniquisette Avenue. Assessors map 69, blocks 23, 24, 25, and 26. The applicant proposes to modify the Willow Bend Country Club special permit by amending an approved clustered subdivision subject to the special permit by adding one additional lot. The total number of lots would increase from 5 to 6. I am in receipt of a letter from the applicant requesting a continuance of the public hearing until December 1st. And you know what, let's,
December 1st at 7:10?
Yeah.
it doesn't say, I'm assuming it would be 7:10.
There are no other public hearings scheduled for the first.
Do we have to make a motion for that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion?
second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Just save the paper.
The second public hearing, same applicant,
That's at 7:15 now.
Yeah, John, I might
Yeah.
suggest, because Mary has a further report to make on the committees.
Finish that.
Let her finish, and then when we get to 7:15, you can do the
Great.
same.
All right, so we got 8 applications. The Community Preservation Committee got 8 applications. From the Planning Department, $25,000 for the update for the Housing Production Plan. From the Mashpee Community Garden Advisory Committee, $18,000 to expand the Mashpee Community Gardens. From Mashpee Housing Authority, the first of 2 applications, $265,000 for siding, windows, and new roofs at Breezy Way. Next one, Mashpee Housing Authority, $168,000 for a new roof at Homeyer Village. I think that's how you say it. The next one is from the Mashpee Historical Commission. They submitted 3 applications. One for $2,145 for the restoration of the Lakewood Cemetery. Again, the Mashpee Historic Commission, $25,000 for a HVAC unit for the one-room schoolhouse, which is across the street from us here. And then they have another one. It's for, they have an overage for the War Memorial right here at Community Park, and that amount is TBD, so that's always unnerving. And then DPW put in a request for a new multi-purpose track and field system over at a stadium over at the middle high school campus for $1.7 million. And that total project is $2.8 million. So that's what's going on with the Community Preservation Committee. And before I forget, every year there's a public hearing, and some of these, one of these is is a large request of $1.7 million, which could clear out, basically what we raised this year. So it's always nice to know from other committees what their future asks are, so we can budget out. And if it's something that you think you're going to be asking for funds soon, you should write a letter to the chairman, is Andrew Gottlieb, just to give him a heads up what you're thinking about. And that's it.
very good.
Thank you.
Design review,
No meeting.
plan review.
Plan review reviewed an application for a new contractor's yard over on Bowden Road, 28. It's the current property owner owns the adjacent property. They operate a marine dock construction business, so the lot would just be used for storage of the materials for that purpose. It was approved, or recommended to be approved by the Board of Appeals. And that's the only application we heard.
Thank you. There was no Environmental Oversight Committee meeting, Historic District Commission,
No meeting.
and Jack is not here for the.
We assume there's no meeting.
That would be a good assumption.
Yeah, I don't think there is. Now that I know, he is really on the, he's the Citizen Advisory, is on the Citizen Advisory Committee for the Environmental Management Committee. So, yeah, that's
Okay.
the one that's been reviewing the
The range.
gun range, yeah.
Okay, it's 7:15. We're going to open up the other public hearing, Southworth Mashpee Properties LLC, 178 to 184 Quiniquisette Ave, map 69, blocks 23 to 26. Applicant proposes to modify an approved definitive plan by adding one additional lot to the previously approved 5-lot subdivision known as Willow Circle. Same request for continuance to December 1st.
Make a motion to continue the public hearing to December 1st at 7:15.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. All right, we're now going to convene the joint meeting with the Affordable Housing Committee. And Alan, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to open up the meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee. We have a quorum here with Bruce Willard, our vice chair, and Melinda Baker, and myself. So pleased to join you today.
Yeah, is your
You know,
mic
you
on,
can-
Alan?
I thought it was.
And if you're more comfortable, you can remove your,
Oh,
Yeah,
All right.
that might be.
can you hear me now?
yes.
Terrific.
Whenever you're ready. It's all set for you. Alan and John, do you mind if I just make a statement with regard to what I think necessitated the presentation made by Chair Isbitz and a little bit about what we can expect to hear?
Please.
I've discussed this a little bit with the board at previous meetings, but ultimately I think what I heard throughout the past 6 months, with particular regard to the Mashpee Commons conversation, but really is a conversation that we need to have about the future of housing development of the town at large. I studied public policy when I was in grad school, and I think what people are hungry for is a definition of the need. We have to define the problem, assess the problem, analyze it, so we can make recommendations on how to mitigate and solve that problem. Ms. Barbie alluded to this in her comments earlier, and I've discussed this with the Affordable Housing Committee at one of their recent meetings. But the town, we have only so many tools in our toolbox with which we can utilize to produce and/or incentivize the production of affordable housing. I believe generally the town is taking advantage of many of those tools. We have ongoing friendly 40B projects. Habitat has been a continued partner. But there remains to be, from my perspective, and I think the data will show, a shortfall of our ability to produce needs based on and in consideration of the actual need. So I thought it would be helpful for the community and for the board, especially as we think about approaching the comprehensive plan update and our visioning work and subsequent potential land use changes, an opportunity to understand what the actual need is and where our shortfalls are so that we can codify and plan accordingly. So that's what I've asked Alan here to do today, is to present the facts, present the data to you so that we can approach future conversations and deliberations, particularly with regard to land use and with regard to affordable housing production, and so we can understand what our limitations are so we can do better. So thank you, Alan, for agreeing to present to the planning board with your committee today.
Thank you,
My
Evan.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John Falone and Chairman Falone and members of the planning board. I hope you don't disappoint you in this presentation. I did work on this quite a bit and reflects my perspective for the Affordable Housing Committee and the work we've been doing together. And I hope I don't disappoint those of you who've come to hear this as well. So and with that, I'll get into this. If I can. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
There you go.
I'd like to start out with the overall population trend on the Cape as reflected by the 2010 census. And I want to emphasize that this presentation is to a great extent based on the 2010 census. The 2020 census is not yet available at the municipal level. With some frustration, we've decided to hold off on the housing production plan after some discussion with DHCD until we do have that data available and a consultant to hire to help us with that. So I appreciate what you were saying, Mary, about this. as you see that from 1990 to 2010, that 20-year spread, the population on the Cape sort of exploded, well, in Mashpee, I should say, exploded, increasing by 78%, indicating a growing desirability of Mashpee and the Cape generally for people who are mostly from the Boston metropolitan area to invest in property on the Cape and vacation down here and ultimately retire. That trend is continuing and is projected to grow by another 30% by 2030. Although that's at a much slower rate, it implies the same factors are at work. And generally, that would be favorable, except for the fact that this has not produced a balanced growth for the Cape, and we're all very familiar with some of the pressures that people have been feeling, particularly at the lower income levels. My own feeling is that there's factors well beyond the control of the Cape that were involved here. I believe that it has a lot to do with the growing success of the city of Boston to become a world-class city, attracting a lot of professionals. Massachusetts generally has grown in a tech sector, and that success has brought in a lot of new people, a lot of professionals who went to school here and stayed here in the Boston area, and faced a growing realization that the Cape was a desirable place to invest their vacation time and ultimately retire here. And that is the crux of our problem. It is well beyond the Cape, as is typical in a lot of states where the cities, the major cities, in fact, affect the economy of the areas around it. So what is that? If we look at the population in 1990, you can see that what the Cape was like 40 years ago. 30 years ago, actually. If you compare that with what has happened in 2010, by 2010, you can see that the first thing that happened is the population was exploding, and new people were investing in the Cape and spending their time here, is that the younger age groups started to decline, particularly in the young adult area. So by 2010, the age 20 to 34 had gone from 31% of the population of the Cape down to 14%. While the senior population had increased from 16% of the total population to 25%. In the middle, I think some of the decline in the 20 to 34 age group, which was 18% of the population, 31% of the population. Some of that went to contribute to the growth in the 35 to 64 age group, which is natural. From 35%, it grew to 43%. However, it was not replenished. Normally, in a healthy economy, those percentages would not change, but the percentage in the young adult age did change because it was not being replenished. People were finding a harder and harder time to set up families here and their home of their own, separate from their parents. And I think this was the first sign of that. We're all feeling that. That's nothing new. We all understand that. These are some of the numbers behind that in the 2010 census. The projection in 2030 is even more severe. The 20 to 34 age group continues to decline down to 11%, according to this projection. Children decline from 18% to 12%. Preschool and secondary school children. And for the first time, the age 35 to 64 age group is declining. That's your workforce. That's where the problems we're seeing in our labor shortage in many of our businesses on the Cape. And the seniors, senior population exploded from 25%. It is projected to increase to 41% by 2030. I mean, those trends are already underway. And so it's an imbalanced growth on the Cape and an imbalance in pressures. And what we've tried to do in the Affordable Housing Committee is give some numeric characterization of that and decide what does that imply for strategies to do something about it. To understand the problem in lower income terms, you really have to understand how HUD defines the programs and the eligible families for these programs that they develop at the federal level. That is really the primary source of funding for all the things that we try to do in terms of affordable housing. So this slide does that in 2021 terms. HUD defines low-income housing, or low-income families, sorry, as families making from $55,000 roughly a year to $78,000 roughly a year. And that's 50%, by definition, 50% to 80% of the average median income of the area. In this case, the area being Barnstable County, the Cape as a whole. Very low-income families, HUD defines as 30 to 50%. That is an income of $34,000 a year. Oops, sorry. I meant to hit that button. Whoops.
You were there.
If I could hit one button at a time, it would be better. Let me see. Okay. All right, so that's the $34,000 a year to $48,000, $4,600, almost $49,000. That's defined by HUD as very low income in Barnstable County. Extremely low income, less than 30% of average median income, goes from $20,000 a year to almost $30,000 a year. The average median income in Barnstable County is $89,300 a year in 2021. HUD comes out with these tables every year. They're pages long. They cover every county in the entire country. So you can look up what you need to know for Barnstable County. Usually they're issued in the spring of every year. And they are used to determine a whole bunch of factors that ultimately involve funding of developments across the country. Another key concern of HUD in their definitions is what is a housing cost burden family? When is a family spending too much for their income on housing? And those definitions are broken down into two categories. A normal, what they would call a normal unburdened family, the cost of housing is 30% of their income or lower. That was originally, by the way, back in the 70s and before, was defined as 25% of their income for housing. During the Reagan administration, because of some of the budgetary considerations that were involved during that time, they increased that to 30%, and it stayed 30% of their income to present. So that's the current definition of a household that is not housing cost burdened, as HUD defines it. It's a family spending less than 30% of their income on rent and mortgage payments and utilities. I think I got a better volume here. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, great. A family that is housing cost burdened is defined as somebody spending more than 30% of their income on rent. Sorry again. Okay. Let me see if I can just get the pointer. That is the top line here. Number of households in Mashpee in 2010 that were paying more than 30% of their income on housing costs was 1,430 families. The other definition is that HUD established is a family that is severely housing cost burdened is a family paying more than 50% of their income on rent. In other words, half of their earnings are taken for housing costs, leaving only half left. And that the HUD defined as severely cost burdened. There were 1,055 of those families in Mashpee at the time. So if you add those two together, you get 2,485 families out of roughly 5,256 families that were counted in the U.S. Census for this purpose. That's 47% of the Mashpee population in 2010 was housing cost burdened. I think that, to me, that was a surprising statistic, and I don't think that's changed very much. If anything, it's gotten worse. So those are the ways that HUD went about analyzing the problem, and because states and municipalities are heavily dependent on the funding from the federal government, we've all adopted those definitions for the way we look at these problems as well, in terms of understanding our affordable housing need. And each of these lines, the red implies or shows the severely housing cost burdened households, and in the extremely low income category area where a family is making less than 30% of their less than 30% of average median income for Barnstable County, that's most of the households in that category are severely housing cost burdened. That's 78%. Another 11% is just cost burdened in that area. That's this number. And the total number of families in the extremely low income housing category total 675 families. So 89% of that 675 households that are in that extremely low income group are cost burdened, or in general mostly severely cost burdened in terms of being able to afford rent and a home. In fact, for all practical purposes, they can't afford to own a home. And the rent alone is an unaffordable, at an unaffordable level for this group. And you can go down each of these columns and see that as you increase your income, the severely cost-burdened households diminish, but not necessarily the groups that are cost-burdened in some way or other. Right up to households that are making greater than 100% of average median income. That's most of the families in Mashpee in 2010, but there's still, in rough number terms, about 500 families that are cost burdened in one way or another. So the problem goes beyond the HUD definition of low income, although to a less severe degree.
So, Alan, on that graph,
The last
red
one?
number on the top,
The last one?
yeah, the red number on the top
Yep.
is the number of households paying, that have a housing cost burden.
That
It's
have
not,
a-
okay, it's
Yeah.
not the total number in that column.
No.
Okay, correct.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it refers back to this,
That
this
yellow, red-
2485.
Yeah,
The
okay.
yellow and red.
And if you add up those red numbers at the top, those are all the cost burden or severely cost burdened households.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. This slide attempts to show go a little step further and attempts to show just what is the impact on an extremely low-income family or a very low-income family or a low-income family for all these definitions, when you apply all these definitions. And what this does is this is the income of the household in 2021 terms for each of these three groups. The extremely low-income families earn less than $29,150. The very low-income families from $29,150 to $48,600, and low-income families have incomes of $48,600 to $77,750. That just repeats the earlier slide. What we've done here is break it down to monthly terms, and then subtract the average median income, average median rent in Mashpee, and this is in 2021. These are all 2021 numbers. So if you take the $1,431 average rent in Mashpee and subtract it from the extremely low income monthly income, a maximum of $24.29. Have to emphasize that there are many families that make less than that. Then you're left with a monthly rent, monthly income, the balance of income of $998 for the month for food, transportation, child care, medical needs, and it explains on a weekly basis, that's $230 a week, explains why this group of families is extremely stressed, because you can't live on $230 a week when you have a family. It just, that is not something that is tenable, and those families are trying to figure out from one week to the next how they are gonna, which of the bills they are gonna pay and how they're gonna meet their needs to any extent at all. For this group, affordable housing is a dire need, because when we build affordable housing, we are limiting the rent to 30% of income, which dramatically drops this $1,431 down to a much more reasonable level. And again, for very low-income families, when you subtract the rent, the median rent, you're left with $230 to $604 a month, a week rather, for all these needs, and that is very difficult as well. Not nearly as severe as the extremely low-income group, but it's still a severe problem for them to try to balance all that out. The low-income families, they're basically able to afford the bare necessities that they need. They still could use help on a weekly, monthly basis. So that's the picture of the families that we're dealing with in income terms. This bottom part shows the housing shortfall for affordable housing for individuals with, or families with less than 80% of average median income. This is the number of households in each of these groups. In 2010, these are 2010 numbers, and for an extremely low-income household, for example, the group, there are 760 families, or there were in 2010, and the number of homes that they found affordable were nothing. In 2010, the extremely low-income group could not afford any homes at all. There were 72 rentals that were affordable. So the total units available for this group of 760 families is 72, leaving a gap of 688 homes that this extremely low-income group of families needed to have in an affordable way. The same thing for very low income. There are 665 families with very low incomes, 290 homes that they could afford, 100. Did I do that?
I'm not sure. You broke it. Take a look. you go.
Would I lean too hard on
You just got strong fingers, Al.
it? Okay. If I can break it, I will. And I think this is pretty important because this goes to the need in 2010 for affordable housing for the lower income households. So 665 very low income families, 466 affordable units between these two categories, rental and homes, leaving 199 unit shortfall for the very low income group. And for low income, 1,005 households were classified as low income, owning 553 homes that were affordable, and 371 rental units that were affordable, and a total of 924 units that the low-income group could find as affordable, leaving a gap of 81. And when you add these three together, it leaves a net need for low-income housing for this group of these three groups of 968 housing units. So that was the need in 2010. That need has probably grown. But it's the only reference point we have right now. So in a general sense, I think we can talk about a minimum need for affordable housing in Mashpee currently of at least 1,000 units. The state of Massachusetts, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has a tracking responsibility that the state legislature passed into law, and that's Chapter 40B. And DHCD tracks the number of units that have been produced statewide by a subsidized housing inventory, so-called SHI for short. And whenever they fund a project or a project gets funded from any source that is restricted over the long haul and affordable and subject to fair housing laws, if it meets those three categories, then it can be put on the SHI. And that's the 10% number that the Chapter 40B tracks at the state level for all municipalities. In 2010, Mashpee had 4.9% of its total units, which were 6,473 units total, and 10% of that is 647 is the 10% number. 298 were affordable, and that's 4.9% of the total. And the number of units of number of those housing units that were classified as owner-occupied, 5,030, and the number of that's the owner-occupied percentage, 82.2% are homeowner occupied, and renter occupied 1,088, or 17.8% of the total units occupied in Mashpee in 2010. More interesting to me was the fact that the homeowner units produced 36 affordable units, or 0.7% of the total number of homeowner units in Mashpee in 2010, while the renter-occupied units, there were, again, 262 of those out of 1,088. That's 24%. Now, that tells me that if you want to get at the problem of the need for affordable housing, we're talking 1,000 units, remember, there is a shortfall, you're going to get a much more of a bang for the buck, basically, and a better strategy to meet the real need if you invest in rental units rather than homeowner units. Now, I wouldn't say that we don't want to say homeowner units aren't desirable, but to meet the lower income need, you really have to focus on rental housing. And that's why, that's evidenced by this percentage is much greater of the number of rental units available. 24% were affordable, whereas only 0.7% of the homeowner units were available or were affordable to those three groups. So that's the lesson I got from that. This is the picture in 2020. The last update to the subsidized housing inventory was on December 21st, 2020. And I broke down the 15 towns on the Cape, by percentage of affordable units in each town and the total absolute number of units, affordable units in each town, and then ordered them by, in this one case, it was the towns that produced the most units on top to the least units, and in this case, the towns that had the highest percentage down to the lowest. None of the towns on the Cape have reached 10%. Provincetown is the closest with 99.7%. Mashpee is down in 8th place with 5.3%. So since 2010, we have increased by 0.4% in our ranking. And I don't think we've moved from this position over that time at all. In absolute number terms, we're a little better than that. We're probably bigger than half of the communities on the Cape and by population. And so we've produced 353 units, 340, having trouble reading that. It's around 340 units of affordable housing, and that's the 6th highest in the Cape. So we're pretty much in the middle. I think we need to do better than that. We still, this is only, rankings aren't really what you would look at if you want to know if you're meeting the need, but it is an interesting picture to see where we are relative to other towns on the Cape. Remember, we have a need for 1,000 units, roughly, so we are a little better than a third of that at this point, so we have a ways to go. Not talking just about 10%, we're talking about real need. So this is an attempt on my part to show where the sources of affordable housing are coming from in the near future. And this is a typical pipeline that we've tried to keep track of in the Affordable Housing Committee. What is being proposed and what is likely to be built. So we've tracked all of the developers that come before us and have produced or stated an intention to produce some housing that is affordable housing, mostly 40B, not all of it. And you'll see that in some cases, there's Main Street Village Phase 2, which doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So not all of these, the point here is not all of these projects on the pipeline that have developers who come before us and said they want to build affordable housing, they don't all reach fruition. So there's some attrition along the way. And there are also, it's years that it takes to produce this picture and get to the construction and occupancy phase. So if you add up all of these that are either currently being worked on by the developers, plus the ones where we know sites that are about to be come into play, like 108 Commercial Street, and other sites that I've taken a guess at here, would produce housing that are available and attractive for future housing. Whether it will actually happen or not is another story. And if you add all that up, there's 533 units. That's this number down here. So this column is the estimated number of units that we could produce or are producing. So that's a total of 533 units. 21 estimated to be homeowner units, 512 estimated rental units, and the total number of affordable out of that, 227 units. Eligible for the SHI under 40B, 521 units. So that's sort of the picture that currently exists as far as we see it on the Affordable Housing Committee. And what I want to emphasize in this number, this sort of chart is that if we built all that, which is unlikely, we would still be short of our goal of getting to 10%. Let alone the need.
We'd be half, we wouldn't, you had said the need in 2010 was 1,000 units, right?
Right.
Yeah, so even if we built everything that's available, we'd be halfway there.
Well, there is about 340 units currently on the SHI that are done and occupied. So if you added that to this, you'd get to about 900 units. You'd still be short. And we know not all these units are going to be developed. In fact, in some cases, they're already inactive. As far as Katuah Road goes, it doesn't look like that one's going to get developed. And Main Street Village Phase 2 doesn't look like that's going to happen. So there's at least 16 units right there that it probably will never get built. And it's hard to understand how much of the rest of it is estimated that will be built or not. So we are short. And these are all the resources that the town has at its disposal. This is town-owned land we're talking about mostly. So my takeaway from that is that we really need the private sector to come up to the plate and do what it can do to meet our goals and our need. And that's a partnership. This business is all about a partnership between the private sector and the public sector. And that's the way housing is built in this country, and that's the way it's been happening on the Cape. I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as the private sector is meeting our need. And that's where the application and the negotiation takes place. Workforce housing is increasingly a concern. This is the group above the 80% that we've talked about as where the labor shortages are on the Cape, and that the housing or the house and land costs, price increases and stress has created a stress on the higher income levels as well. We're talking in this, sorry. We're talking about the 100% of, this is median household income, and 120% median household income. These are numbers that came from the Cape Cod Commission. For renters in 2015, these are the need figures, or the gap figures, I guess, that the shortages for these income groups. And projected to 2025, this is basically the source here is a 2017 source. So from 2017 to 2025 is a projection. So these are sort of actual numbers, and these are projected numbers. You can see that the needs have not increased substantially in the lower income groups because there's nobody who will stay here in those income groups. They can't afford to live here, so they go somewhere else. At the 120% level, you do have a significant increase in need, and that's almost doubled in the 120% of median household income. For owners, there's even a more dramatic picture that's developed in the higher income groups, where we are talking, this is where you were talking about 100% of median household income for owners. This is where you would expect your teachers to be, your firefighters, your police officers, store clerks, retail clerks, town hall administrative staff. That's in this group here. And that's where the shortages, our labor shortages are. And so if we want to do anything about balancing the economy and the Cape, we really have to focus in on this area. The charge for the Affordable Housing Committee is in here, in the lower income areas, and we can't forget that. This is where the dire stress is. But increasingly, we can't ignore this either, because to get a balanced economy and get the labor that we need for our businesses, we need to focus in on this area as well. And there's a good, 4,000 a gap of about 4,000 units right in here that we are talking about as a part of the need. So that's a big number. Thankfully, there are some resources that are being developed. This is increasingly over the years, the need has been growing in this area, but the resources haven't been there. So the problem has been getting worse and worse. The government had not been providing any incentives to funding incentives to do housing that appeals to this group. So this was a challenge, but increasingly some developers have focused in on this, and the resources to do this have been responding as well. These are the income levels we're talking about for workforce housing. They range from a low limit at 60%. This is the 60% of average median income in the workforce housing area is $58,320 to a maximum at 120% of average median income. This is we're talking the moderate income level of $107,160. So there's quite a range in here. This is $77,750 to $107,160 is the really the moderate income range. There's an overlap here a little bit between 60% of average median income in HUD terms, defined as low income, and workforce housing, which starts at 60% and goes up to 120. So from the 68% to 80%, there's an overlap. In funding, it can come from either source. It can either come from HUD, or it can come from those agencies that are providing assistance in that range and calling it workforce housing. I don't think it matters how we count it, as long as we're housing those families. Mass Housing has come up with what it calls a workforce housing initiative, and this is their fact sheet for that program. I won't go into detail except to say that this program has been around for a few years. It's funded housing that is currently built and occupied in Orleans and Bourne and Falmouth, and some of the, in fact, the developer we have for Red Brook Village has already been involved in workforce housing in Falmouth, in one of the phases they've been doing it in Falmouth. So we do have experienced developers on the Cape, not just the one that's here in Mashpee, but others. And that one of the key aspects of this is that they will provide, Mass Housing will provide up to $100,000 per unit for a workforce unit. So those are substantial resources. If it costs $300,000-$400,000 to build a unit, which is probably what is currently realistic, it means that up to about 25% of the unit can be covered by public funding. The AFL-CIO has a housing investment trust that it has had for a long time, a few decades. And right now, that's committed to workforce housing. And they are also involved with affordable housing at the 80% of average median income or lower. Their commitment is to union labor, That's their approach to this whole thing. What their hope is that when they invest in affordable housing, they're going to employ union workers to build that housing. So that's their thrust. Plus, on the workforce housing area, we're talking about union people who will live in this housing. So there's $6.8 billion in this trust fund currently. Over the years, they financed another $9.3 billion worth of affordable housing construction, including workforce housing. And that's been a viable source of money for tax credit housing, which is the primary vehicle for producing affordable housing in the country today. And this is the ending of this is our affordable housing goals, which we're basically saying is for affordable housing, very low income and extremely low income being the key targets for affordable housing, and also for workforce housing to the extent we can find funding to do that, and increasingly we can. The HPP, which is the document that each municipality is supposed to have as far as their goals for the 40B tracking system on the subsidized housing inventory. We had an approved housing production plan in 2015 that called for 32 units a year to be produced. DHCD comes up with that number based on our statistical data that we provide them, and they're basically saying that if we put out 32 units a year for 10 years, it's a 10-year perspective, then we would reach our 10%. It ignores a lot of factors, including the fact that the denominator changes in that 10% for every 10-year period. When the census comes out, you have to take that total number of units and put it on the denominator, and if the town has grown, you could be standing still and your percentage will go down.
Right.
So you have to keep aggressively trying to improve that. We have stuck on the $6.8 billion, huh? Okay. That's it. We are now waiting for the consultant for the HPP to do that study. Oh, that's it? Good. All right. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this.
Thank you, Alan.
Good job. Super.
Questions? Comments?
I have a couple comments.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that was great, Alan. Thank you. I'm going to steal some of your graph ideas for my work in Yarmouth. Just a couple of things, because, I watch the news about affordable housing, and I don't know if you've read the proposed affordable housing bylaw in Falmouth.
The affordable housing guideline?
No, the town of Falmouth is proposing an affordable housing bylaw.
Oh, bylaw, okay.
And it's very simple. And they did some studies with union studios about like these big intersections in town that they felt the town would accept, height and density. So they've pinpointed some of these lots throughout Falmouth. And they have a bylaw, I think it's, I don't know what the densities they're allowing, but it's up to 3 stories. And 25% affordable housing if it's rental, 50% affordable housing if it's home ownership, so if it was condominiums. And I thought that was, and it's not a Chapter 40B, right? It's a local bylaw. So the developer doesn't have that burden of all those Chapter 40B regulations. So I think that might be something good for us to look at. I mean, coming from the planning board, right? I'm always thinking about zoning. So, and also, Mashpee became a brick and mortar development town, late compared to other towns because it's unique history with Native Americans. I think there's some properties in town that are ripe for redevelopment. Some underused commercial properties, some other properties that have been used for lots of different things that are just looking a little sad. So that might be a redevelopment into affordable housing, under a nice bylaw, again, coming from the planning board, might actually lower the impact of that property on the town with respect to the environment and traffic. You might find that. So that might be a nice, I know that when you do the HPP, you look at the town-owned land, but you might want to put on the list lots that are ripe for redevelopment.
When you say put on the list, I think there's a time to put it on the pipeline list and a time not to. If it's somebody's pipe dream, it could be realistic or not, I would not put it on the list until there was actually some active consideration going on.
You're right. You're right. I was thinking more with like zoning initiatives.
Right.
Yeah.
So from a zoning point of view, I think you do have to take that
Yeah.
kind of possibility into account. And from our point of view, when we're trying to look at hard pipeline projects that are in play and what we can do to help facilitate that, I think we are looking at more than just town-owned land.
Oh, yeah.
We have to. We have
Yeah.
to look at the privately owned land and how which, like you say, which of those are underutilized, where the owner may have an interest in either upgrading it or converting the use or selling to some developer who will produce affordable housing, and what we can do to facilitate that.
And then I always found and there's not a lot of funding for this, so this is always a puzzle, but smaller infill developments. You can, Alan knows, you can get, the interest of the state and the federal government when you have a development that's like 39 units or above, but, neighborhoods are receptive to affordable housing if they kind of fit into the character of their neighborhood. So yeah, it's more than, of course, you want more than one unit per lot, but not something that would overwhelm the.
We've actually had some conversation with Habitat, because that's the ideal program for this kind of approach. And they do have an interest in scattered site, infill kind of development. And they may not necessarily put one house on a lot. They could realistically put a couple houses on a lot, like they did at Mendes Way.
Yeah.
And be very, what do you call it, have a very satisfactory environment for two families, even though, and this is one of the problems, it doesn't meet the minimum square footage threshold
Right.
in the zoning ordinance as it stands. So I think that's one area where I really would encourage you to explore that. What is an incentive for a Habitat kind of a program to get involved in sites that predate the minimum 1 acre threshold? And how can we send?
Affordable lots bylaw or something like that.
Right.
Where some of those site requirements are waived if you do an affordable unit.
You could put
And-
4 houses on it, 1 acre lot, very easily.
Yeah.
Right.
Even 5,
And, we had this big, I don't know if any of you were in attendance, but we had a gathering of the regulatory boards in town last week to discuss wastewater and water quality issues in town. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and so I live off of Route 130, which seems to have less sensitive environmental issues than other parts of town. So, that was another thing I was thinking, is that if we're gonna talk about height and density, we also have to, look at the environmental impact, and I was thinking that maybe my neck of the woods on Route 130 would be a good place to put some of that. that was it. Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Bruce.
Thank
and
you.
thanks,
Thank you.
Melinda.
Thank you all.
Evan, what, if I can put you on the spot,
Sure.
based on all of what we heard, you know, what's your, if you had to wrap it up?
Well, I think I'd start by echoing Mary's first point. And one of Alan's essential findings, we need to take advantage or grow the number of tools we have in our toolbox to produce affordable units. I think we do that by incentivizing the production of those units to the private sector. I think I've always stated, and I agree with Mary, that there are a number of properties, particularly in our existing commercial districts, where we can incentivize the production of those units by redeveloping underutilized sites that are currently under current zoning. They still exist in the shape that they do because under current zoning, it's the highest and best use of the property.
Right.
We can change that, and I think it's a really important and salient piece of something to think about, especially as we go through our comprehensive planning process and our visioning process to identify those neighborhoods, those zoning districts at large, or individual properties that could benefit from such a zoning change, and define the parameters of height, density, building typology. Because one thing I also want to stress, and something that I've alluded to before, we can produce as many units of like detached single-family houses as we want, but you're not going to shift the demand curve appropriately. You need to grow in the appropriate places, meaning the housing types that are non-existent in the town, and focus particularly on rental housing. So those shortfalls that we're identifying that we can't necessarily meet utilizing the tools we currently have at our disposal and we are taking advantage of, we should incentivize with a zoning solution like the Bylaw Mary cites, and other zoning tools. You know, because beyond what we know it exists as the need for the moderate, low-income, and extremely low-income categories, there remains the 100 to 120% moderate income levels, but also those teetering just above that too,
Right.
that it's growing more and more difficult to access housing or retain it, or if you know, it's becoming untenable across a variety of income groups. So it really is, I think, about incentivizing the production of a building type and a housing type that meets that broad cross-section of need, that even goes beyond the deed restriction. So I'm hoping through this conversation, when we offer a definition of what the need is, in terms of, you know, the HUD definitions, that need is, I think, it's more expansive than just that. So zoning solutions like Mary proposed are certainly exactly what we should be considering. I would caution against further incentivization of continued production of single-family homes, especially considering environmental impact. When we look at rezoning and redevelopment, we should certainly be considerate of where and when phases of our wastewater project are going to come online. Because we don't want to, these are problems that need to be taken together. It's not an either-or strategy.
That's right.
And I want to stress that. The growth needs to occur in the appropriate places with the appropriate building types, with parameters and design criteria and building types that A, meet a community need, but also fulfill a community vision. So again, zoning that doesn't further incentivize a sprawl pattern, but meets that demand and what is often referred to as the missing middle, which really speaks not to incomes, but building types. We have two extremes of building types. We have the detached single-family home and larger multifamily stuff, nothing in the middle. So through our visioning process, through the comprehensive plan, I'm hoping it should be a goal of ours to identify some of our underperforming commercial zoning districts and discuss as a community how we can incentivize mixed-use development of housing typologies that fall within that range with the appropriate criteria. So, and that are slated to get on wastewater treatment.
Beyond wastewater, right.
So, yes, I second Mary's comments. I thank Alan. I think people have been hungry for a definition of the need. I think it's fascinating that those are 2010 numbers. I'm very eager to see the most recent census figures because we can assume that problem's gotten worse, as you alluded to. But COVID really changed things also. So I think we were trending in in a negative direction for a long time. I think COVID certainly exacerbated those trends.
Right.
And put the housing market in a really unstable condition that I'm not, this is a personal opinion, I'm not sure will change without significant intervention. So there's a lot of work to be done. But yes, I think we know the areas of focus, and I think we know that these issues can't be dealt with individually or in silos. I'm speaking particularly about housing and wastewater management.
Right.
They have to be dealt with in concert. And so, yeah, in closing, Alan, it was a wonderful presentation. I thank you, and I think a lot of good came out of it. It's a really good start, I think, to our comprehensive planning process, to our visioning work that's going to be done, because we can define a problem. If we have a definition to a problem, we can certainly strategize how to mitigate and solve it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, committee.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, we're going to adjourn the joint meeting with the Affordable Housing Committee. Thank you very much.
Alan, you'll need a motion to adjourn, I think.
Yep, motion to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn the Affordable Housing Committee?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
We're
Very good.
we're adjourned.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great job. Okay, we have an A&R for Evergreen Energy LLC.
Yes. I have some bigger copies for you guys, too.
Thank you.
I'm sharing his carry.
There we go.
Right, there he is.
State, we learned all about affordable housing.
Okay,
Good afternoon, Sam Iamelli with JC Engineering. Here we are simply looking to create two lots from one existing lot, which is Lot 58 on Assessor's Map 13. Both of these lots will front on Main Street, Route 130. Both lots have adequate frontage and lot area in this zoning district.
questions, comments?
Just two things. This plan is entitled to endorsement, but I just wanted to note two things. Your subdivision regulations generally call for a scale of 1 inch to 40 feet. This is 1 to 50 feet, but it's well within your discretion to accept the scale as it's shown in the plan. Additionally, there's no statement on the plan relative to the zoning compliance, but that's only a requirement if the plan alludes to a nonconformity. So this A&R is showing the creation of two lots, or excuse me, splitting one lot into two. Both lots have adequate frontage and are conforming to the minimum lot area of the zoning district, so you can endorse it. But I just wanted to note those two items to you.
Okay, thank you.
This isn't land court land, is it?
No.
Okay. I'm fine, just make those notes for the next time.
I'm cool with that. I mean, it meets the requirements, all we're looking at is 150 feet, and it meets it in the lot sizes.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
All right, good.
You need a motion to endorse.
So be,
Do we have a
Second.
It's a motion that we consider this plan approval not required.
cool with that required.
Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Do we all have to sign?
I only need one signature because
Okay.
it's
Who wants it?
everybody.
I'm tired.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Oh, John.
Who needs to get up?
You're all empowered to sign.
We'll let you do it, Joe.
Date today, 18th?
Yes,
Oh,
no, 17.
17.
17th. All right, that's it. Thanks, Devin.
I'm always a day ahead.
That was so good.
11/17 approved. Put the date
Presentation.
here and here.
Yeah, he's a smart guy.
I was going to ask the question.
Herbie Hancock.
Hey, Joe.
Anytime, here to help. That's what I do.
Need to get up. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very much.
John, I'll need your signature on the Form N to file with the clerk when we leave the meeting. I just don't
Okay.
have it with me.
Yep, thank you. Okay, new business. Vote to set public hearing date for review of a special permit application made by Longfellow Design Build to construct a retail grocery store at 475 Falmouth Road, 9 Shellback Way.
I just want to make the board aware, this is the same application that was recently withdrawn for the retail grocery store that is a mandatory referral to the Cape Cod Commission as a development of regional impact. It's the same application. They did receive the withdrawal certificate of action from the board, so the commission accepted that withdrawal also.
Okay.
So they've refiled. We'll be undergoing the exact same procedure, and the folks over there at Deer Crossing will receive more mail from me, but I did notify them of the procedural issues, if you want to call them issues, that had occurred. And so they're expecting the mail, but it has been refiled. I suggested a public hearing date of January 5th, I believe.
Correct.
Day before Little Christmas.
And just to note, at that January 5th meeting, assuming the board proceeds with setting that public hearing date, it will just be an open of the public hearing and a deferral to the commission.
Okay.
So I move that we set the public hearing date to January 5th at 7:10.
So, but second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Clicking along.
Chairman's report, I have just a couple of comments. I've received many comments and concerns about the allegations made at our meeting on November 3rd, and have been asked specifically about how we plan to address the allegations. I've talked separately with the town manager and town council. Upon their advice, we're going to closely follow the Attorney General's office and State Ethics Commission as they begin their investigations. That will inform any course of action, if there is a course of action. Until then, I ask that we please focus on the important work of updating our local comprehensive plan. In your package, there's some reading material on conflict of interest for planning boards. I included the ethical conduct for boards, commissions from the Board of Selectmen. And then the attachment, the Pierce versus Mulhern, was a legal document that council sent me based on questions that I had for him. And I actually did read the whole thing, and it's pretty interesting stuff. But it does talk about, honesty, integrity, fairness, non-judgmental behavior. So I would encourage you to read those documents.
Get my Saturday night reading.
And maybe take you into Sunday. That's all I had. Evan?
All right, I have a few updates. I just want to get to the documents I want to share with you. As I had indicated, our consultant for the comprehensive plan update has provided us with a few things. First, a rough outline for the process for the plan development itself, indicating a launch kickoff of the actual engagement work and the beginnings of the plan development in January 2022. That's really to get through Thanksgiving, to get through Christmas, and to give our consultant enough time with which to compile and analyze existing conditions, utilizing reports, data sets, anything that the town has already invested in and received for the benefit of the plan development. So with that, you'll note a completion date, a final draft proposed to the town of a comprehensive plan, if we can stay on track and on course here, of September 2022.
Which is great.
Yeah, and we're getting started a little bit later due to it took a little bit longer to procure. So that could push out a little bit farther, but I think that's been taken into consideration, but I will follow up with our consultant But it's about a 12-month-long process is what we're anticipating. They've also sent to me a rough outline, just a numbered list of, again, the studies, reports, existing plans that have been approved and adopted by the town or solicited by the town. I think there's more that we can give to them with some thought. This is just their stab at what they were able to find just online. But I'm sending out a request for information to all the relevant boards and committees, as well as the town department heads, to provide us with as much information as they can to build out this list for our consultant.
So Evan, just to clarify, this is a list they gave us?
Yes, they took a stab at what they were able to identify online on the assumption that there's more. I believe there is more. A lot of this is what we had included on the RFP itself.
Yep.
But things like, water quality reports and like the ACOM study of Santua Pond and traffic studies, all of this stuff is relevant information.
Probably Alan's presentation.
I think they've noted the housing production plan on here. If not, but these are the relevant documents. I would just ask you and particularly the long-serving members of the board, if you can review this list. If there's anything that comes to mind, please notify me by email. I'll send you also an email follow-up with these documents, as I will with our fellow department heads. But I'd like to get them as robust a list/data set, if you will, as possible.
Have they received any of these?
They have access to all of these.
Okay.
All of these they have access to.
Good.
It's just anything else that's not published online that we want to make available to them. Additionally, I asked them in our first meeting about what options we might have, web-based options for both community engagement and data collection itself. Because, our online platform, our online presence is pretty limited. It's a very standard, fillable website. Doesn't provide a lot of opportunity for data collection, really, besides say, hey, here's my email address, please send me a comment. There's a lot of great platforms that they've provided to me, which I need to go through and vet. But essentially what my intention is to have an independent, unique website dedicated to the comprehensive plan update itself that also serves as a means of collecting community input and actually compounding and compiling that data into something that's functional and useful. Additionally, something that we could roll out potentially a survey with as well. So I showed you just the multitude of options that they've provided to me. I'm going to be going through them over the coming week to see what I think might be beneficial and functional and within our budget to utilize. But the goal really is to enable as much participation in the process as possible, and beyond just a participation standpoint, but something where we can actually solicit feedback. And maybe even map and put that feedback into some type of visual format. Lastly, is a list of stakeholders that our consultant has compiled as well, simply from information that they were able to find online. Ultimately, we want to be able to provide them with a comprehensive list of all relevant stakeholders in the town with a contact person so that as we roll out a community engagement action plan and conduct workshops and solicit that targeted feedback, we can walk away and say we've been in contact and solicited feedback from all of those relevant stakeholders. So there's a robust list here. I'm going to be filling in a lot of the blanks with regard to contact information of people that I know, but I'm certain there are organizations, groups, neighborhood associations that you may be aware of that I'm not aware of, and you might be able to connect us with the appropriate person who would be interested in serving as a contact individual for that. So I'd also ask the board if you could review this document and let me know by email, which I will also follow up with to remind you of anyone who's missing here, as I will also do the same, and I'll ask my fellow department heads to do the same. But again, the intended goal is to make sure we have a comprehensive, inclusive list of stakeholders with which we can invite to participate in this process. That's it for the comprehensive plan update. I will have follow-up meetings with them in the coming week or two to go over the request for information, to build out the stakeholders list, and to give some direction about what I think would be a functional platform with which to launch and begin kind of the outreach work that needs to be done for the comprehensive plan, and really the marketing PR campaign that is going to be a crucial piece of the launch. So there is more to come. I'll probably say that for every meeting for the coming months. But the community can look forward to January 2022 for, the formal launch of this process.
Yep. So you don't have formal meetings set up with them yet? It's just, there's still data gathering?
At this point, it's just bi-weekly staff meetings with which to keep each other updated with regard to data collection.
Okay.
And we will work early between now and January on the action plan that we roughly put together and attached to the RFP to put that in a format that we foresee as functional and that will be as broad and reaching as possible. But there's a definition to be had with regard to what the engagement plan will look like and what types of events, workshops we will conduct. Again, ultimately, it's about getting as many boots on the ground and getting as many people to understand why we're doing this, why it's important, how they can be involved, and the opportunities to have their voices be heard.
Right.
And how we can actually capture that data into something that's useful in the actual plan development itself. So again, early phases of this, but it's, I'll come back to you with an update with, as we move through the coming weeks and month and a half, get through the holidays, a fully built-out engagement plan for the visioning work to be done.
Good. Okay, thank you.
So with the website stuff, are you gonna pick that with them, or?
Ultimately, it's going to be a consideration of functionality, how do we want it to function, and how much it costs. So I need to narrow down this list that they have, and I would be pleased if the board would like to go through some of these options and let me know what you think. I'd be happy to take that feedback. But ultimately, yes, I think I'm going to take into consideration the functionality of the platform and how much it costs, and ultimately make a decision in that regard.
Do we procure that, or do you think we can do it through?
I think we can utilize the already Weston and Sampson came in around 125,000.
Right.
Our allotment allocation is 150,000. I'm looking at these prices around like $5,000 for the process, for the license for the year. So I think we're well within our budget window, and I think it'll serve a great purpose.
Good. Very good.
Oh, I got more, don't I?
Yeah, one more.
But wait,
going.
there's more.
Keep going.
I put consultant procurement back on the agenda just to update you, because if you recall, before the dissolution of the development agreement process, we had asked to solicit quotes for consulting firms for traffic and for environmental review. We have received bids, but I did not know exactly what feedback to give to the town manager and the firms who have submitted bids on, are we going to do anything with them? So I have done nothing yet. I just compiled them in my office. I've given no feedback to the bidders, and I've given no recommendations to the town manager. So I thought I'd ask the board what you think I should do.
Oh. This makes,
Put it on hold.
Yes, that was my assumption.
At this
but,
point, put it on hold and see if we can get the town manager to still give us the money, and we can put it toward the local comprehensive.
It was my assumption, but I figured I'd, since you requested it, that I would ask you.
Do you want us to take a vote, because it all started with a vote?
I have no issues with taking a vote. If you'd like to make a motion to that effect, I
Can
can
you put it on
communicate that to
hold?
the town manager.
The procurement for consultant for traffic consultant and the environmental engineering consultant to help us through the initial stages of the development, three-party development agreement.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
And then lastly, this is about my department's CPC application for the Housing Production Plan funding. I did discuss with you last week about a letter of support, but there was not a motion to have the chair sign on your behalf. So I took it upon myself to provide a draft for your consideration. And I would ask if you are okay with it to authorize the chair to sign on the board's behalf.
Authorize the chair to sign the letter of recommendation for the planning department. Application for funds for community preservation money for
All right.
update to the HB.
Got it, second.
All in favor? Aye.
Well, you know, when Dennis doesn't just say, okay, so move, you know.
Do you have a version that doesn't say draft? through it?
I'll have it in my office for your signature.
Very good. All right.
Thank you.
Nothing else?
Now, Dennis, you're on.
I make a motion we adjourn.
I just want to, before,
Oh,
I
for
want
Pete's
just a note. We received correspondence
Right.
that I put in your packet, and were listed on the agenda, but I received some correspondence yesterday and the day before that are not put on the agenda. I just want to let you know that they're in your packets.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, you were saying, Dennis?
I make a motion we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.